Welcome back to Franchise Player, and today we're going to be talking about a very, very special console, and that is the Nintendo 3DS. So the 3DS seems like, at least in 2024, and I'd argue since 2021, that, the popularity of the 3DS has really exploded. And I think it's exploded for a couple reasons. We'll go over each. I think this system still belongs in any serious gamer's arsenal. Don't get me wrong, you can emulate 3DS games, but it's not quite the same as playing on original hardware. So yeah, let's get right into why I think this console is still such an amazing piece of technology in the current year. With the closure of the Nintendo 3DS eShop and online play, it's really unfortunate on one end of the spectrum, right? Because you can no longer purchase games from the eShop, you can no longer get games digitally, you can't play online unless you have a modded system. So like I said, on one end of the spectrum, that's super negative, but I actually think it's almost a positive. The closure of the shop, the closure of online, I think really brought a lot of eyes back on the system and made people realize like, hey man, like the 3DS was pretty special. It was Nintendo's last full handheld, and I think a lot of people are starting to get nostalgia for the 3DS these days. So one thing to keep in mind with the Nintendo 3DS family of systems is, the system is over a decade old. You're now starting to have a lot of people who grew up with the 3DS that are now, full-on adults. They're working, they have jobs, maybe they're finishing up with college, right? And they're starting to get a lot of nostalgia for this system, and they're wanting to buy it back. They're wanting to buy the system again, buy all the games again that they grew up with, and kind of relive their childhood or re-explore the library that they had a lot of great memories with and really miss playing. And on the other end of that spectrum, along with nostalgia, you have people like myself, right, who I didn't grow up with the 3DS. It wasn't a system that I really had any nostalgia for, and I actually got my first 3DS all the way back in 2021. So I've actually talked about how I got this system on the channel before. Got it a few years back. Luckily got it at a thrift store thanks to one of my buddies. And it's a system that I think like people like myself who don't have a lot of nostalgia for are really like, man, this was an awesome system that I missed out on, and it's really cool to go back and explore this library, see what games are on it. Obviously you have all the great Nintendo titles, right? But you have a ton of just underrated games, hidden gems, a double-edged sword of the closure of the online store and online play, and then the nostalgia and people growing up and wanting to buy the system back is values of this system, prices of 3DSs, even 2DSs, new 2DSs are astronomical. If you go on eBay and look at, sold listings for new Nintendo 3DS XLs, Nintendo 2DSs even, you're gonna be blown away by prices that these systems are going for. So your best bet is trying to dig up the old one you have from when you were a kid if you still have it, or maybe getting lucky and finding one locally at a garage sale, on Marketplace, OfferUp, something like that. Because even at retro game stores, these are gonna, they're gonna cost you an arm and a leg. In a lot of cases, most 3DSs will actually cost you more than a Switch Lite, which is pretty wild. Even with how expensive these consoles are, with how expensive these handhelds have gotten, I would say it's totally worth picking one up. If you can get one for like $150 or under and it's in good condition, depending on the model, I would maybe say it's worth pulling the trigger on. The next reason why I think the 3DS is still such a popular system is it was the last true handheld from Nintendo. Yeah, the Switch is kind of a combo system. The Switch Lite is a dedicated full handheld. I love my Switch Lite, right? But the 3DS is very portable, right? Like this system, it's got that clamshell design, and Nintendo rocked with the clamshell design from the Game Boy Advance SP back in like 04, 05. All the way up until the end of the life with the 3DS. So Nintendo, held steady with that clamshell design, which I think some people got tired of and thought it was a little bit stale. But looking back, it was a fantastic design for a handheld system that hopefully they can bring back one day. And I just think it works out perfectly for handheld gaming. It protects the screen. You can toss it in your pocket. The new Nintendo 3DS XL is the largest of the bunch, and you could probably still throw this in your pocket. Might not be the most comfortable, but there's no way in hell you're putting a Switch Lite in your pocket. So portability of this being Nintendo's last clamshell device, I think is definitely a huge factor and helps with the popularity. And I've always been a huge fan of gaming on the go, and growing up with portable only systems like a DS, a PSP, the GBA, it was a cool era because games were designed fully for handheld gaming, right? So in the 3DS, you had games that were exclusively designed for the 3DS, and they weren't going to be on a home console like a Wii or a Wii U. So you got really special handheld only games that we don't see nowadays, because even on something like the Switch, those are games that are meant to be played, on a TV, on a home console, and on the go. So it's a really kind of blended line now of consoles where you no longer have games that are strictly developed for handheld and then a home console variant. This was the last era from Nintendo where you'd get a game that was developed for a handheld system from the ground up from day one to be played on a handheld and a handheld only. So I think a lot of people miss that style of game where you can just jump in, jump out, and you're not having to sink a couple hours into some crazy open world game. Yeah, bringing this system with you is a total breeze. I think it's very portable. If you mod the console, which I'll get into in just a bit, it's great to have a lot of games on there so you can bring it with you without having to have a case loaded up with Switch game cartridges or 3DS game carts. Don't get me wrong, I love having physical games, but sometimes it's really nice to have a modded system with just tons of games loaded on it so you can bring it with you. And here we are with the library of the 3DS. So you had amazing games like Ocarina of Time 3D, Majora's Mask, which were originally N64 games, which were now playable on the go, which was incredible for the time and honestly still is incredible, right? It's pretty cool to go back to these groundbreaking Zelda games, these legendary games from the N64 era and play them on the go. But, with the 3DS, you had the obvious AAA games, right? You had, your Pokemons, your Mario games, Luigi's Mansion, Dark Moon, there was tons of great AAA games from Nintendo, but there was also a ton of underrated games and I would say hidden gems or games that maybe just didn't get the love that they should have during the era of the 3DS. But the 3DS is really a system where it's like, hey, the library pretty much has something for everyone. And even if you're into some, obscure genre of games, I guarantee you there'll be a handful of them that you can definitely play. So one thing that the 3DS definitely had a leg up on the competition during its era, aka the PS Vita, was the game library. I loved the Vita. I think I might prefer the Vita a touch more than the 3DS, but the library of the 3DS is pretty hard to beat even to this day. And in classic Nintendo fashion, you had the ability to play original DS games on your 3DS. So backwards compatibility was here again. Most Nintendo consoles allow you to play one generation back, and it was no different here. So if there were some original DS games that you were still wanting to dive into, you definitely could. So having the entire 3DS library and the original DS library playable on one system, it's still amazing to this day. Highly recommend playing some OG DS games on here if you get the chance. Another massive reason why the 3DS continues to be such a popular system, even in 2024 and probably beyond, is, well, it's easy to mod. And I know some folks, they're against modding a system. They don't think it's right. They're like, oh my God, the developers. No, it's like, hey, if Nintendo shut it down, the developers can no longer make money off of it. It is what it is, man. Like, it's either you're going to pay a ton for a physical version or you're going to mod the system. And modding the system, luckily, is extremely easy. There's a ton of tutorials out there that make it super simple. I recommend using at least a 128 gigabyte memory card or a 64 gigabyte memory card, just so you can store a bunch of games without worrying about storage and, running out of space. But yeah, the eShop closure really gave Nintendo fans and gamers no other choice. I'm all for physical media. I'm all for having a nice physical game collection, but on something like the Vita or the 3DS where, hey, you don't really have much of a choice, I don't blame you for going the modding route. And easily the best part of having a modded 3DS is having access to the entire 3DS global library, North American, Japan, you name it, you have access to it, along with virtual console games, which are really fun, such as, Super Nintendo games, Game Boy Color games, even some GBA games. It's really nice to have those on the go. And of course, you'll have some DSiWare games. I was never really into DSiWare. It's something I haven't explored at all, so I'm really looking forward to diving into that as well. Those were pretty much the main reasons why I see the 3DS still being such a popular system and a relevant system even to this day. I think it's, like I mentioned, the nostalgia blast of, people coming of age now in the workforce, wanting to blow some money on what they grew up with. The last full handheld from Nintendo. Yes, we have the Switch Lite, but this was a system that was strictly built for handheld and designed for handheld use. The incredible library of this system and the ability of playing original DS games, and of course, once modded, emulators, all that fun stuff, and the fact that it's easy to mod. So Nintendo really gave gamers no choice, and with it now moddable and the 3DS basically fully open to homebrew and any games accessible to anyone. I definitely think that's put a pretty price tag on this system. But yeah, I love the 3DS. It's a system I'm still playing a ton. You know, there's a lot of days where I find myself picking up my 3DS even over my Switch and sometimes even over my Vita if I'm looking for, you know, some handheld gaming. So yeah, I highly recommend getting a 3DS. If you can find one for the cheap, definitely pull the trigger on it. But yeah, these systems are expensive. Hopefully they go down in price eventually, but I don't think we'll see that for a really long time. But as usual, appreciate you guys for watching, and you know, let me know some of your memories with the 3DS. Let me know if you're still playing the 3DS today, and yeah, as usual, we'll see you soon with another video.